message or was going to be defiant. Joining us now, Michelle Malkin, who's written about this already and has her own observations. First off, we did ask the viewers, but first off, I want to get your response, Michelle. Do you think the president got the message?
Not from that press conference, and judging from all of the excuses that he gave, foremost among them, as Melanie just highlighted, this idea that somehow all of his overreaching was something that he was forced to do. This is the Democrat equivalent of the dog ate my homework. The emergency made me do it. I think it's laughable that he's blaming voters for somehow not understanding that this was a matter of exigency as opposed to his agenda, when his top agenda item that he highlighted during the campaign, well before any of these manufactured crises, was what? The federal takeover of health care.
But Michelle, isn't it interesting that the president and Nancy Pelosi both used the what sounds like a catchphrase, emergency situation, and that we've never heard it before? Wouldn't it have been helpful, if that were true, for the president to have said that to the American public? We're doing this because it's an emergency situation. GOP and Dems alike think it's his agenda.
Yeah, of course, and it is. I wish that Joe Wilson had been at that press conference, because there were so many "you lie" moments among them. And it is interesting that all of the Democrats are using this as their talking point now, clearly as some sort of post-election consultancy said, you know, we've got to use this. It's the only way that we can defend the radical progressivism of the last 2 years, which had been soundly rejected yesterday.
What about adding 1/6 of the economy in the form of health care is an emergency? What was the emergency there that they needed to put out or to solve?
Right, Eric. Yeah, that's what I just said, is that absent any kind of manufactured crisis that they're going to play as a card or invoke, this is something that all of the Democrats had been lobbying for well before the financial crisis last year.
Well, he did use the term that he was shellacked. And as we debate in the breaks what kind of message the president had, everyone has a different opinion. Let's find out what our viewers said. We asked them the same question. For example, Greg in Alabama says, President Obama didn't get the message. He bailed out on his own party for his own agenda. He hasn't shown any signs of getting it.
David in New Jersey says no, the president does not get it. Although he seems humble and contrite, he's undoubtedly trying to justify his intrusive agenda.
And Joyce in Naples, Florida, this man just doesn't get it. He has an agenda of socialism, and he has no intention of changing courses. And in fact, Michelle, did he not bring up cap and trade in another form, taxing carbon through the EPA?
Yeah, and of course, the EPA and Obama's radical environmental czar, Carol Browner, have been waging a war on carbon, a war on jobs, a war on the economy, largely outside of legislative circles. And I think that's the great danger here. As much as conservatives and limited government activists have to celebrate about yesterday, so much of this agenda that is not emergency-based, but which is ideologically based, is going to be carried on despite what voters say, which is why it's not just about 2010, of course. It is looking forward ahead to 2012 as well.
Yeah, and let's talk about the future. Nancy Pelosi sat down with another network and talked about her future and the president's future. For example, a second term. What would happen? Listen.
I believe that Barack Obama will serve 8 years as President of the United States. I believe that he will also demonstrate to the American people, and he has, that what we had to do in the short term was because we had an emergency situation. Some people interpreted that as too activist, but it was emergency, and it saved us from a depression.
Well, there you have the terms
There we
again,
go again.
Michelle. But I mean, in terms of her opinion, we've seen it before. Sometimes at this, when it looks dark for the president or Democrats, they do pivot and then go on to win a second term.
Well, that's true, and she invoked history and talked about Clinton and Reagan to cite her beliefs. But this is someone who believed that she would still be House Speaker today, and she isn't. And I can certainly imagine her in front of the camera before election night telling herself two things. I believe I'll still be Speaker. I believe Obama will be re-elected. I believe the people will believe me when I say it was an emergency situation. Emergency
Michelle,
situation.
you know, we had a ventriloquist on here. You could be.
This has been fantastic. Andrew Tantaros opened up the first hour with a song. Crazy. Good job, Michelle
About
Malkin.
all these secret hidden talents of our guests. Michelle, thanks so much.
You bet. Take care.
It's good, curious. I wonder if.